Joining me now from Washington, Syed Rahmatullah Hashimi. He is a representative of Afghanistan Foreign Ministry and a special assistant to the spiritual leader of the Taliban, Mullah Omar. Just characterize the United States' relationship to your government.
Well, after the Soviet withdrawal, the United States just ignored Afghanistan and all those problems that were there. So many of those problems has been resolved now, like the reunification of that country and disarming the people, the opium eradication, and is having one administration. Now there is one problem, that is the terrorism existence of bin Laden in Afghanistan. And we have been telling people that if anybody can give us some kind of evidence, we will resolve this problem. But so far we have not been given any kind of evidence that shows that bin Laden is actually a terrorist.
Is it your position that bin Laden is not a terrorist, and your government's position that he is in fact not a terrorist, and that he is in fact not taken credit for terrorist acts, and that he does not, both in his rhetoric, suggest terrorist acts against the United States?
Well, he says that he has done nothing, and we don't know anything. If anybody claims that he is a terrorist, should prove it. We have said that he is not even allowed to be politically active against any country.
You were meeting with people at the State Department and talking about your government's position on bin Laden as well as other issues?
Exactly. We have said that we will try him in Afghanistan provided that we are given evidence. That was rejected. We gave a second proposal in which we asked the United States that if they think he's a threat to the U.S. security, they have to send international monitoring group to watch him for the rest of his life so that he has nothing and meets nobody. That was also rejected. And we gave a third proposal in which we asked 3 countries, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and a third Islamic country selected by the United States to decide his future, so that we have some kind of justifications to our people, so that this man is not a good guy and he should be expelled or extradited or whatever. But we have not been assisted in this sector, and for the 4th time I was here again asking the U.S. government to at least open the doors of negotiations on bin Laden issue. He was in Afghanistan 17 years before we existed. Such people were instigated to go to Afghanistan and fight the Soviet Union. And such people were called the heroes of independence, not by us. Such people were called the heroes of independence by the President of the United States, by Mr. Ronald Reagan. And all of a sudden, they have changed to terrorists. Oh.
Well, I think this discussion exemplifies the problem with U.S. policy toward Afghanistan, which is that for several years we have not really had a policy toward Afghanistan. We have had a policy toward Osama bin Laden, because Osama bin Laden is a person and a symbol of a phenomenon that United States thinks is a direct threat to it because of the bombings in Africa, because of other activities of which he is accused. I don't have access to that secret information that shows that he is a terrorist. There's a trial going on here. But I think the important point is, what is the context in which this is taking place? And the context is a country that the major world powers have spent billions and billions of dollars to destroy for over 20 years. A country which was one of the poorest countries in the world at that time, and which has lost much of what they had, both in buildings, roads, government structures, and most important, people, and educated people. So that someone like Mr. Hashimi, who is a 24-year-old former refugee, is one of the most polished and educated people that the current authorities in Afghanistan have to send to the outside world. Because all the other people who were educated and were specialists were killed, jailed, or expelled, and are living as refugees in various places. Now, that is a context in which any assistance is welcome. It's an extreme context in which extremist ideologies may seem to some people much more rational, because they are dealing with a very extreme situation. And if someone comes to them and fights on their side and is willing to assist them, and they are not getting what they see as significant assistance from other people, the people who helped them destroy the country as part of their civil war, then they will welcome that person. That is what is now happening. The Taliban's original agenda was not to support international terrorism. Now I believe the Taliban as an organization is allied with people who are guilty of international terrorism. People who, as Mr. Hashimi correctly says, were originally recruited to come by the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan to fight in that war, were given that training and supported to do that. Now they have turned against us, we have turned against them. But what we are having a dialogue of the deaf about this subject, in which I'm not supporting the Taliban's position, but we are not addressing the major problem, which is the destruction of that country, the death of millions of its people, the huge drought which is making hundreds of thousands of people into displaced people. And if we did address those, that would change the terms of the discussion.
I'll come back. I'm going to have to come back to Osama bin Laden in just a moment. But what are what we should be addressing is what this government, what the American government's policy is with respect to Afghanistan, and whether it can send aid because of the drought and the destruction. I assume you're talking about is what? I assume you're talking about the destruction of the Buddhist statute, or you're talking about the destruction of something else? I'm
talking about the destruction of virtually everything that was of value in Afghanistan over the past 20 years.
Are you talking about destruction by the war, by all the war with the Russians and the war and the Civil War, and what are you talking about?
That's right, the war with the Soviets, the civil war among the various groups, the criminal activities, culminating in this criminal destruction of world heritage that just took place. But if you drive around Afghanistan, all the roads are destroyed to the point that there are small children standing by the roads who should be in school, picking up dirt with their bare hands and throwing it on the huge potholes, which are bigger than the paved parts, in the hope that a passing trucker, who is probably a smuggler of some kind, because no one else has the money to drive trucks, will give them a little money, maybe the equivalent of 1 cent or 5 cents, in return for throwing this dirt on the road. And mostly they don't get that. So that, if you go to the capital, Kabul, you will see that, I don't know, 50%, 60% of the buildings are in complete ruins. There are whole neighborhoods that are completely desolated by rockets and missiles that we paid for with our tax dollars and that our allies also paid for, and that the Soviets also sent there, and that today those missiles are still being sent there to the Taliban on the other side by the neighboring countries.
Characterize the Taliban for me.
The Taliban are a transnational organization which arose originally in Afghanistan. They represent the traditional rural mullahs of southern Afghanistan, who are linked very closely to some of their colleagues in Pakistan itself through a number of madrasas, Islamic academies, where they study. This is a social group that every government in Afghanistan for the last 100 years tried to marginalize and put out of power. But as a result of this war, most of the other elites that had come to power, the secular educated people, the Soviet educated Western people, have been eliminated. Furthermore, these people who arose in response to the situation of chaos and violence in southern Afghanistan have then been built up and used and manipulated.
So all I have to say is that we don't say we are perfect. We say that who could do better than we did? We reunified that country that was almost fragmented formally. We eradicated the opium cultivation. Afghanistan was producing 75% of all world's drugs. So we finished it in 1 year. We disarmed people. The United Nations couldn't do it. In 1992, the United Nations passed an appeal asking for $3 billion to repurchase those arms. And certainly it was impracticable. They couldn't do it. And we did it in no time and very easily, and spending not even a penny on that. So 95% of the people are disarmed now. So all you can see is that who could do better than we did? In 5 years, we don't say we are perfect. There are still rooms for improvement, but we have not been assisted so far. All we have seen is criticism, isolation, ostracism, and cruise missiles.
Where are the rooms for improvement? Let's consider that for a second.
All we have said that, please, if you have concerns, don't send us cruise missiles. Please talk to us. We have not been recognized so far. We have not been assisted so far. We have been under sanction. So what do you expect from a country which you don't consider as a government, which you just hit with cruise missiles? And we are still very patient.
The cruise missiles were not directed at the Taliban. The cruise missiles were directed at bin Laden.
Whatever. Did they kill bin Laden? And what is the justification for killing a man without even giving him a fair trial? Did they kill him, or did they kill him?
I think they're very prepared to give him a fair trial if he would like to present himself for trial.
We were not asked that he was needed. And how do we know that he is?
May I interject myself here?
Please.
I think this illustrates the problem. You see, Mr. Hashmi lives in Afghanistan. His primary concern is not protecting U.S. embassies and U.S. destroyers. Now, of course, I don't agree with him, and I don't agree with the policies of the Taliban. But people in Afghanistan are concerned about the problems of Afghanistan. You are pressing him to be concerned about the problem of the United States, which is that bin Laden poses a threat to us. Now, if we want to have relations with people in Afghanistan, we have to recognize their problems, which actually are a lot bigger than ours. And we have much more capacity to help them with their problems than they have to help us with.
And we are under sanctions. So we have said that they have to engage with us. They have to consider us as a government and then talk to us about their concerns. We are humans. We will understand the problems. And we cannot be dictated. We cannot bargain on our independence. We have said, okay, if anybody is found guilty of killing civilians, we will punish him, and in our constitution, anybody found guilty of killing civilians will face capital punishment. So could you please help us and give us some sort of assistance, some sort of evidence that could lead to bin Laden's involvement in those attacks? We did put him on trial for 45 days. We asked the United States, Kenya, and Tanzania to give us some sort of evidence. Nobody did give us. And now we have come to a decision that maybe the United States is looking for a boogeyman always. Because if they really have concerns from bin Laden, they have to talk to us. We have a full-time job reconstructing our country. We don't want foreign problems for us. But we have not been talked to. All is that we have seen is we are being bullied.
I think it means that we are much less likely to consider various policies that I think would be much more helpful, which is to say seriously engaging not just with the Taliban, but with other Afghan forces as well, but also with the Taliban, without recognizing them as a government, over the issues of the drought, of the need for reconstruction, of the need for them to have friendly relations with all the countries around there, and to work with other donor countries to put some serious money on the table, not to give it unconditionally when very important conditions haven't been met, both about terrorism and also about the equality of women, but to show that there is a serious willingness to address the real problems of Afghanistan. I think we should criticize and we should make demands about these things, but we shouldn't only do that. We should recognize there are vast human problems that are partly of our making, and we have a responsibility and also an interest to address them.
Our making because we were a player in the Civil War, because we came to on the side of the forces fighting the Russians?
That was the right thing to do.
That's what I thought.
But
so
the way
why is the problem our making then? Because we supported the rebels?
There were different ways of doing that, and there were different rebel groups. We subcontracted our policy to Pakistan. We did not pay any attention to what a future government of Afghanistan might be like because we thought the Soviet Union would never withdraw. So we supported the most extreme groups. We also created this fragmentation that Mr. Hashmi spoke about by giving these weapons not just to 7 different parties, but to anyone who came and asked for weapons and said they were fighting the Soviet Union. So you had a huge spread of criminality, of smuggling, of killing, of theft. So we made it almost impossible. And when people from the old royal regime in Afghanistan tried to form a common political front, Pakistan stopped them from doing that because of their political differences with the old royal government, and we supported Pakistan in doing that. So while we were right to support the resistance, the way we did that contributed to the policy, to the problems that Afghanistan has today. And then, after the Soviet Union withdrew and collapsed, we walked away from it, and we gave some humanitarian aid, but the quantity was pitiful compared to the huge amounts of money we had spent on the war, and it continues to be.